Hey guys, wanted to put together a little tutorial on using liquid green stuff. It's a really handy product. I have the Citadel liquid green stuff and a couple models here that I've assembled that I'm going to be using it on. So I have a couple cyber wolves and they have some seams on the back leg, and I think I can do, kind of use some liquid green stuff to fill in a seam around where their head goes onto their body. So this one should be pretty straightforward. I'll show you how I do that. I also have an example of a hard surface using liquid green stuff. So the repulsor I've been putting together and converting has some seams from where it didn't exactly match up the pieces, and so not too bad, but there's a couple spots that could really use some liquid green stuff to fill in the gaps. And it's really important to use this on models that have visible seams, because later when you are painting, if you have washes, if you're using washes, which I'm definitely going to use on these wolves, the washes will seep into these cracks, so that'll accentuate and make the seam even more visible. And then if you're using dry brushing, which I use on most of my miniatures and will definitely use on these wolves, that can accentuate it even more. These ones aren't too bad, but some other wolves I put together, I didn't do a great job of using liquid green stuff to fill in the seam down the ridge of their face. These models don't have that problem. But then when you go to dry brush, the paint picks up on that edge, so it can kind of accentuate the problem even more. So what I'll do, also talk about, so I have liquid green stuff, paper towel just to keep things neat, a little pot of water, and then the main brush I use for this liquid green stuff is a very, very old dry brush. This is a pretty crappy brush. There's stray hairs and everything, but it doesn't matter for the liquid green stuff. And I cut down the bristles so that they're really close to the metal part of the brush, so it's a really hard kind of brush. So that's really good for picking up the liquid green stuff, which can sometimes be difficult to do, and also good for kind of pushing the liquid green stuff into the cracks. And then I just have an old glaze brush. So this one I use kind of like a cleanup, so can dip that in water, and if there's too much liquid green stuff in somewhere, I can use this to kind of pick up the excess, much like you would do kind of in like a two brush painting technique. So let's first start off with these cyber wolves. So what I'm gonna first do is get some liquid green stuff on my brush, and so I pick up like a good amount, and then the way I do it is I dip this in water, and then on this, if you're using a painting palette, you can put this on your palette. So really water down the liquid green stuff quite a bit, but make sure you have some chunks in there as well. And then you kind of want to see, where is the what's the best direction to paint this, because you want it to, as you draw your brush across the model, you want it to reside into the cracks. So in this one, there's fur going this way, so I'm going to paint in the opposite direction and push that liquid green stuff into the cracks. And so I definitely want to be careful about not putting too much liquid green stuff in here, because I could definitely kind of destroy the fur detail and just make it like a flat surface. But I'm just gonna see, I need another kind of chunk of liquid green stuff to position in here. That might be a little bit too much. That's probably good now, so I'll get it a little bit. Oh, it sunk to the bottom. Alright, okay, there we go, I got a little chunk. So I can just kind of place that in the crack here, and by watering it down, kind of works like a wash, that it will fill in the gap there. And so Now I can kind of get the excess off my brush. Again, kind of work it into the crack and see how I'm picking up a lot of that excess liquid green stuff. Again, not wanting to disrupt or destroy the the sculpt of the fur. So kind of spreading out the excess of that liquid green stuff so that it's so thin, won't affect the model, but have a nice kind of line of liquid green stuff in the leg there. So that should be pretty good. Definitely something I recommend with the liquid green stuff is to work in multiple coats. So especially because I'm thinning this liquid green stuff down so much. Oftentimes we'll do 2, 3, or maybe 4 coats. Better to do multiple coats than to have too much green stuff built up in an area. So get another chunk of my brush here. Try to get a little water on that. Okay, so for this I'm going to start at the top of the head, and again working in the opposite direction of the fur, so trying to get it to pick up in the back of the head there. And just work it around. So I need a little bit more. So I'm actually going to put that liquid green stuff chunk there, and I call it liquid green stuff, but it's not actually very liquid. So I find you have to water it down quite a lot in order for it to get in all those cracks. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna do a similar thing, get the excess off my brush, and just go around, going in the same direction. So in this, I'm kind of picking up the excess liquid green stuff, working it into the crack of the model. So something like that. And so yes, you can always water your brush down, thin this down a lot and really work the excess into the model so that it's so thin when you paint over it you won't see it. So I want to make sure I'm doing that. So there is how the first coat of liquid green stuff on this wolf. So I'm going to let that dry, and so I'll do the same process on these other wolves. So I want to talk about doing it on a hard surface, and it's very similar, except there may not be kind of as clear of a direction that you should paint in. So with this, what I'm actually going to do is kind of just hold the tank on an angle and try to get some liquid green stuff on there, get a little water on my brush, and just work the liquid green stuff into the cracks. So it's like a bolt on the hull here, so I definitely want to go back and clear the liquid green stuff out around that, because liquid green stuff could build up around that feature, and then it'll look like a blob, not a bolt. So definitely want to go back and clean that up. So just working around the model. Pushing the liquid green stuff into all these cracks and crevices. And holding mine on this, because there isn't a clear direction, can actually go both ways. And make sure that the paint is really getting in there, wipe off the excess. And then on the other side, a similar process. So can just rub my brush along the edge, and that should pick up, kind of get caught by some of those cracks. Like so. And then a bit more here. So I'm just kind of getting the liquid green stuff caught by the edge that I didn't match up perfectly. And then just painting the liquid green stuff into that crevice. So same thing here. And then over here. Oh, should definitely make sure you guys can see what I'm doing. Cool. So then I'm gonna do a similar thing, wash my brush off, and then just go through and on this, kind of, using the angle of that brush and the angle of the hull, just go through and get off the excess, because I only want the liquid green stuff in the crack. Yeah, so I don't know if you could see, but there's a ton of liquid green stuff around this bolt. So I just go around it, clear all that liquid green stuff away. So I only want the liquid green stuff on the edge, filling in the crack. I don't want it on the hull, because on a flat surface especially, that will definitely show up. So do the same thing on this side. So just rubbing the side of the brush along the hull, picking up all that excess. Cool. So I think that looks pretty good. Oh, there's a little bit more in the front that I need to get. Yeah, see, look around your model as you're doing this, and find anywhere that you see a gap that you want to fill. I'm trying to get this chunk on my brush. Okay. So putting it on the tank edge there, and yeah, there's some edges here I want to fill in. And just kind of rubbing it multiple times into the model, letting it catch itself on any hard edges or fall into any gaps. That's really all we're looking to do, is to fill gaps and soften up any hard edges from misaligned parts. So let's do a cleanup pass on that. Just lightly going back and forth with a watery brush, pick up any excess. And here. So it looks pretty good. I think in some areas it needs another second pass. So I can push a lot into the hull. You can always have it really building up here. You can always start with a lot and then use your brush to re-pick up the excess. So I could do that same thing here. So start with a lot, you really pile it on there. And then I can go back and just pick up any excess. Okay, that looks pretty good. Got a lot of excess on my brush, so I'm just gonna work it into this other wolf so I don't waste it. Get some water on there. Okay, come back to him. So back to the repulsor. And just go and clean up these edges, take off the excess. excess here. So actually, let's clean that up. Again, can reuse this excess on this wolf, so I'm not wasting any of this green stuff. Water it down a little bit. Get in all those little nooks and crannies. Cool. Okay, back to the repulsor. Rubbing my brush back and forth, picking up that excess. You know, paying special attention to the bolts and things so it doesn't affect the look of them. So I think that's pretty good. So I think the repulsor, check the rest of the model. I think that's all the parts. So these guys, I just quickly put the green stuff on there. So I'm going to go back with a watery brush and work this into their surfaces. Can even use the tip of my brush to kind of push the green stuff further in and give it a more textured approach so it builds it or blends in with the fur better. So I'll just really water that down on the areas that, you know, the areas of the fur. Again, so I'm not filling in the fur and losing that great detail there. Yeah, there we go. Getting rid of a lot of that green stuff. Cool. So that's green stuff tutorial on applying green stuff to organic and mechanical models. So I'm gonna continue on with this